Witajcie w rozmowach logistyków. Nazywam się Piotr Skobało. Poprzez ten podcast chcę Wam pomóc szybciej i efektywniej budować biznes. Podcast nagrywamy dzięki sponsorom. Partnerami dzisiejszego odcinka są Magna Valley, firma doradcza oferująca usługi optymalizacji łańcucha dostaw i logistyki. Tworzymy rozwiązania redukujące koszty i efektywnie skalujące operacje. Budujemy wartość Waszego biznesu. Europa Systems, producent i integrator automatyki dla logistyki i produkcji. Ponad 25 lat doświadczenia zdobytego w setkach projektów w 35 krajach. Czy jesteście gotowi na dawkę praktycznej wiedzy? Mam nadzieję, że tak, bo zaczynamy nowy odcinek. Hello everyone, welcome to Logistics Conversations, also known as Rozmowy Logistyków. Today's episode is special for two reasons. First, it will be recorded in English, and second, we will have a distinguished guest joining us. Our guest today is Jim Tompkins. Jim holds a PhD in industrial engineering from Purdue University. Over his 50 years career, Jim has founded 15 businesses that have generated over $2 billion in global revenue. He is also an accomplished author, having written and contributed to over 30 books, including 3 focus on leadership. Additionally, Jim has delivered over 2,000 conference and keynote presentations and served as CEO for 10 businesses. Welcome, Jim Tompkins.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be here. And you had to include that 50-year part, huh?
Sorry for that. It was, it's always depending.
So I'm
up to a certain level, you're counting and you're proud, then it starts to be...
So it's going to be hard for my credibility if I claim I'm 12 years old and therefore only 62 years old. But
but
great
you
to
know
be
how
with you.
they hire a 20-year-old guy with 20 years of experience, the ideal candidate.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's say speaking about this career, so can you share your life in logistics journey, let's say which started in Purdue University, and let's say how you grew up to becoming what we know about you today is a global thought leader in supply chain?
Well, it was a very unorganized path. I was at Purdue and I took a junior level course in facilities planning. And the professor made so much sense to me. And we didn't have the word supply chain. We didn't even use the term logistics back then. What we called it was material flow. And he talked about material flow coming into a factory, what's done in the factory, and then what's done when it leaves the factory. And that was the beginning of the course. But then what he talked about is that factory was just a portion of several factories or several transportations or several storages that had to result in getting the product to the ultimate consumer and making the consumer happy. And so my mind got into this thing called material flow. And no matter where I went, if I went to a grocery store, if I went to a restaurant, if I went to an auditorium to watch a theater, no matter where I went, I started seeing things from the perspective of material flow and how material, information, and cash, if you look at those 3 flows, you'll understand how business is working. And so I had the concept in my head of supply chain. I didn't have the word supply chain, so I didn't invent the term supply chain, but I had the concept of flow, and that's how I tried to understand. And no matter where I was looking at flow, I always want to know what went on before and what goes on after. What goes on before, and what goes on after. And so I was actually looking at the ecosystem, a network of a series of functions that resulted in material flow. Then I got stung by that bug, and I got just mesmerized by this professor. His name was Dr. Rudy Reed. And Dr. Reed recruited me to go after my master's degree. I told him I couldn't do that because I was married and my wife and I were poor and we needed to make money. He says, don't worry about money. I'll pay for it all. And so he paid for my education. He paid for all the books and all the living expenses. And I got a grant for all that. And then when I finished my master's, he says, Jim, you're the best candidate I've ever had for a PhD. And so I went for a PhD. And once again, I focused on material flow. And so that is it's not what I did, it's who I was. I was a material flow guy. And so then it became logical when I left the university and I went to another university to teach. I taught that, but as I taught it, I got encouraged to give some seminars. And I taught some seminars on material flow. And people in industry loved it and said, "This is the absolute right thing to do. Can you help us from a consulting point of view?" So I started doing consulting. I had no idea there was something called the consulting industry. I had no awareness of how you should do it, but I taught a course. The guy from industry heard it, said, "This is good stuff. Can you come help me?" I came and helped him. I got paid. And then I got paid more. And then I couldn't handle it all. So I hired a graduate student, another graduate student, another graduate student. 40 years later, I was the chairman and the CEO of Tompkins Ventures, one of the most exciting new companies in the world. After having been a consultant for 40 years, I now switched from Tompkins International to Tompkins Ventures because I saw a need to address what was going on in supply chain in the world when COVID hit in year 2000. So it's what I've always done. It's the only thing I know how to do, and I've been fortunate enough to do it with some really cool people, and it's been a great career.
Yeah, okay, so perfect. And can I ask a little bit more about this, let's say, education part? So, how much it helped to shape your, let's say, career in supply chain management?
Well, so a lot of the things that I learned became obsolete in the 1990s. And then a lot of things I learned got obsolete in 2000 and then 2010 and 2000. And so if you actually look at the things I learned, or if you look at the early books I wrote, they're totally irrelevant today because the magnitude of what supply chain has become is totally different. But what is the foundation of that is my understanding that business was going to evolve and there were going to be mistakes made. Um, I always find it interesting when young people start on their career, they don't want to make mistakes. Well, I didn't have the objective of making mistakes, but I made so many. And those were learning opportunities. So the learning opportunities turned into a deeper understanding, and the supply chain being so broad and having so much potential for depth, the concept is I'm still kind of a professor, but now I don't have students in a university. Now I have businesses in the world, and it's my job to help them grow and prosper. And to do that, I have to grow and prosper. And so that's kind of been an evolution.
No, this is exciting because also, let's say, looking from a perspective of a guy who's trying to earn knowledge and let's say learn. I'm learning a lot also from business cases and a lot from my colleagues how they do stuff. Of course, let's say there are books, but let's say the business is often let's say quicker than academics in a sense. But that's very interesting. And you're speaking about let's say changes and how it evolves across years. And what are the most significant changes you've seen in supply chain management over past decade or let's say past years?
Well, supply chain back in the 1990s was all about efficiency. The only discussion you ever heard on supply chain was how do I reduce cost? How can I take transportation costs out? How can I reduce inventory? How can I reduce the amount of time it takes to make something? So it was all about increasing efficiency. And then around 2005, all of a sudden, someone had the idea that, well, being efficient is important. It's going to always be important, but also being effective is important. And so we realized that, wow, you could use the supply chain to increase sales. If you have a shirt company and you can produce the shirt in a week, and I have a shirt company that takes me a month to produce it, you're going to be in front of me because you can be more effective in supplying that customer's needs. And the customer's going to come to you. He might even have to pay you $1 more for that shirt, but he got it when he wanted, where I was delayed and cheaper, but he went with you. So starting around 2005, it was about efficiency and effectiveness. So we needed to really worry about customer satisfaction and delivery times and those types of factors. And that led us into some different thinking with respect to inventory and so forth. But then from 2005 until 2020, those were the two factors, efficiency and effectiveness. But when COVID hit, there was all of a sudden this awareness of resilience. And so 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, there was a shock. Oh my goodness, I can't buy tomato soup. Oh my goodness, my brand of beer is no longer for sale. Oh my goodness, toilet paper, there's none in the grocery store. What happened that we couldn't have these products produced and have availability? And so it became much more than just efficiency and effectiveness. We had efficiency, effectiveness, and resilience. That resilience in 2000 led to a whole different way of thinking about supply chain in 2022. In 2022, because supply chain all of a sudden got all this visibility, we gained a second R of respect. And so we went from only efficiency to efficiency and effectiveness to efficiency, effectiveness, resilience, and respect. And when we got respect, we got accepted into the boardroom. And the boards were now starting to talk about supply chain and understanding how critical it was to their business. And so, what we've seen is the rules that we played by back in 1995 have nothing to do with what we're doing today because the objectives have changed. And now you can have the greatest efficiency, the greatest effectiveness, but if you don't have the resilience, you don't have the reliability, the dependability to produce when the customer wants it, you're in trouble. And therefore, we now have the respect. And so when we go to a boardroom, they're really interested in understanding what is the supply chain's view on this? What do you think we should be doing with respect to some of these global conflicts? And how does that affect our availability of supply? And that has really changed the way the field has evolved. And so I would say today, the field has nothing to do with what it was 20 years ago. And today it takes a much broader, much deeper person to make the right decisions in supply chain.
Okay, let's say I started my career around 2005, 2004 in Whirlpool Corporation, so American company with a very big supply chain, a global supply chain. Let's say for many years I have used this knowledge that I have gained there because it was already like the double function. So first of all, of course, cost effectiveness and so on, especially in logistics, in warehousing, transportation. So we're looking for every dollar, but in this available to promise concept, order to delivery. So this, let's say, taking care of that we are working together with the market and understanding how to shorten the route to the market and so on and so on. So this is, let's say, really interesting. However, from my perspective also, and let's say COVID, let's say, hit when I was running a supply chain of also, let's say, Polish-based but globally selling, let's say, company with a few factories, let's say, across Europe and multiple warehouses. And this resilient part was really something that was, let's say, very interesting. What advice would you give to companies looking to improve their supply chain resilience post-pandemic? So in today's world, the dust settled a little bit. It's already getting more and more cozy. But let's say, in order not to forget what happened a few years back, what the companies should do today.
This is a big shock to people because what we found before COVID, we really embraced just-in-time inventory. And the concept is you want to synchronize supply and demand, but we did that assuming certainty. And so we had an assumption that supply was always going to be there and it was going to be reliable, and that demand was going to kind of follow some sort of a intelligent forecast. And therefore, we kind of could forecast demand and we kind of had the supply to meet it. And so supply chain was a pretty good world. And that says we could refine the planning and the execution so that we could reduce inventory and just in time worked well. All of a sudden, COVID hit, supply chains were broken all over the place, and a bunch of people rushed in and says, that's just in time is evil. We can't have just in time inventory. We got to have just in case inventory. So they brought about just in case inventory, and now they found that they did have product on the shelf. Unfortunately, they weren't making any money because their costs were so high. They had excessive inventory costs, excessive amount of warehousing. They had transportation costs that were higher, and so what they wound up with,
Yeah, the bullwhip
yeah,
effect.
exactly. So it was a real battle. So it turns out it's not an issue of just in time versus just in case. It's clear just in time is the right approach, but how do you deal with the uncertainty? And that became the real topic of evolution in thought. And so where we are now with respect to what companies need to do is to get a good understanding of resilience. What we need to do is have visibility and we have to have connectivity. Okay. And so you're not an island unto yourself. In fact, I don't even like the concept of a chain anymore because a chain is talking about individual links. And I want to look at the overall ecosystem, not as a series of links, but kind of as a network where we're all working together to accomplish the objectives of the ultimate consumer. So we need to get much more connected to our suppliers and to our customers. We need to have real time information so that when uncertainty occurs, which it will, we have an ability to respond to it in a way that allows us to get the best outcome. So it's a resilience is really key, and it's really important that we have the ability to have visibility and connectivity so that we can provide resilience.
Perfect. So it looks like let's say a very strategic approach. So looking from the very top of the company in order to have it covered. And could you share like some example story or some success story of like a big strategy where let's say it has changed the performance of how the company was working due to this let's say supply chain strategic approach?
Yeah, I actually wrote down a specific example. I'm not going to give the name of a company, but it was a consumer products company that was in the food industry, and they were providing product to grocery stores. And before COVID, they were getting 8 inventory turns per year. So we're doing pretty well, not great, but pretty well on inventory turns. They were profitable, and their on-shelf availability they didn't measure because it was assumed to be 100%. Um,
Okay, yeah.
and and so things were good, and that's where they were back in just in time before COVID. Then what happened is COVID came about, and their 8 turns per year resulted in being cut in half. They're only getting 4 turns a year because what they started seeing is their on-shelf availability went down to about 87%, but their suppliers on the OTIF, the on time in full, the on time in full dropped to 65%. And so that says your inbound is only 65% of the time is it going to match what you expected, and therefore your on-shelf availability went down to 87. Now the stores were yelling and screaming, we don't have any ketchup, we don't have any tomato soup, we need to have this product. So the stores, the retail guys, are going crazy, and the supply chain guys say, okay, crank up the inventory. And so what happened, their inventory turns went from 8 turns to 4 turns, and that's when they had a major uproar because now the chief financial officer is saying, what are you people doing? My
With the
budget is
working
based on
capital.
eight. Yeah, I'm based it on 8 turns, and now you only give me 4 turns. That's totally unacceptable. You don't have the working capital. You don't have the amount of space in the warehouses. This is not good. And so what they did then is they put in the right visibility tools. They replaced all the spreadsheets. I mean, the supply chain was being run by spreadsheets and phone calls. And what we did is we replaced that with great connectivity, great visibility. And what we did is we implemented digital supply networks that allowed us now to get our on time in full back up to 99.6%.
No,
And
that's
that
fair.
resulted in on shelf availability of 98.2%. And we were able to do it by taking our inventory turns to 11 turns. So we increased turns, but we had the right product there when it was needed. So therefore, the retailers were happy they didn't run out of ketchup.
Yeah, so I can assume that most of the companies will take these kind of numbers blindly.
Yeah, well, when people started talking about OTIF, a lot of folks said, "What's an OTIF?" I said,
Yeah,
"On
yeah,
time
yeah.
in full." What does that mean? They said, "Well, you have to ship what the customer asked for. And I said,
What and when?
oh, really? Yeah. I mean, oh, wow. And so it was shocking to some people. So it was shocking to me that it was shocking to people.
Okay, and what would, I don't know if you could mention some common mistakes that the companies are doing when trying to optimize, say,
When you started the question, I had one answer in mind, and when then your last three words, when you're trying to optimize. Okay, very interesting way to end the question, Peter, because optimization. I'm a PhD industrial engineer. Okay, so I have way too much education, and my education is focused on how to optimize things. Okay, so that's who I am. However, optimization is obsolete. And the reason it's obsolete is because the level of change that we're undergoing is requires us not to have a optimal solution for this set of data. What we need is optionality. And optionality has replaced optimality. And so I'm not trying to get the best absolute solution. What I'm trying to get is a solution that's going to work well when it's hot out or when it's cold out, when the sales are good or when the sales are bad, when there's war in the world, there's not war in the world. So I have to have optionality. So you show me an optimal supply chain, and I will in today's world, I'll show you a broken supply chain because it's relying on this one transportation provider because they're the best.
I will quote you on. I love that quote. I sorry, I already written it down. Optimization is obsolete. It's a
Yeah.
quote. Let's say I'll be posting that tomorrow morning on LinkedIn because I love this
Well,
quote. Yeah, really, I know what you mean. And also, let's say this is one of the reasons that I asked the question in that way, because usually it's yeah, find cost, reduce cost, and let's cut here, cut there, and then let's say think about how to serve our, let's say, customers.
I love it.
Okay,
I
and
love it.
speaking about, let's say, the role of leadership, can you talk a little bit, because you're writing also a lot about it and saying a lot about it? I agree wholeheartedly that this role of a supply chain logistic guy in the company was, no, okay, it's growing, and we would like to be present at all these board meetings and to be in a C-suite, as they say. But can you talk about a little bit how do you see this role in driving supply chain innovation, and let's say how can it influence the companies in a better way?
Well, I think here's another quote that might be of some value to post in the morning. Strategy before structure. Strategy before structure. You have to understand what you're trying to accomplish and what your needs are before you can structure the solution. And so it's leadership's job to develop strategy and then to assure alignment with that strategy. I think one of the things that prevents us from being innovative in supply chains is when people are not aligned on strategy. You think the objective is to do this, and the guy next to you think the objective is to do that, and they're different. And therefore, although you're trying to work with teamwork, you have different beliefs as to what you're trying to accomplish. And so I think we really need to understand, how does the supply chain strategy support the corporate strategy? That's number one. Number two, how do I make sure that the people in the organization are aligned with that strategy? And then number three, how do we minimize the impact of the people that are trying to protect the status quo? The I like, some people call it change management. I don't see how you can manage change.
Without
I
change.
think you have to lead change. You have to be a cheerleader, not a cheer manager. Okay, and so I believe in being a cheerleader and leading change by making people understand that if we're not innovative, if we're not creative, our supply chain is not better than our competition supply chain, we're in trouble. And this is another point that I think is missed sometimes. It is not about my company versus my competitor's company. It is about my company's supply chain versus my competitor's company's supply chain. I would rather be in a so-so company in a great supply chain than I would be a great company in a so-so supply chain. So the reason you want your supply chain to be strong is because your success depends on it. If you're marvelous, but your supply chain isn't, you're not going to stay in business. It's that simple. And so it's really important that we unite, not just within the company, but within our supply chain, and we start treating these people with fairness and dignity and respect, and we respond, we're accountable, and we produce what we say when we're going to say it, and then we make sure it happens. And so it's really critical. You give a great leader a good supply chain, and you give a poor leader a good supply chain, and the difference is both will be mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. But this one gets mentioned because they're going bankrupt, and this one gets mentioned because they just maximize the value for their investors.
Yeah, no, that is really true. And what trends do you foresee dominating in, let's say, next 5, 10 years? So let's go a little bit into the future, into the closer future.
Well, I think this whole nearshoring, friendly shoring is impacting us now, but it's going to impact us more going forward. And so I see the relationship between Europe and the United States, although it's good now, it's going to even get better. And I think the relationship with China and parts of the Middle East and Korea and Russia are going to grow less strong. So I think what we need to do is understand what is friendly shoring, what is near shoring, and then how do we use our specific competitive advantages to allow all of our friends to us and us to agree. So I think near shoring is huge. I think end to end is huge. We really have to go way back to the raw material. I mean, everything that has a supply chain, once upon a time, either came out of the ground or was grown out of the ground or it came out of the water. It
And then
starts
was
with a raw
somehow
material.
modified. Yes.
Yeah, so we got to figure out where that is, and then we got to start at the raw material and take it all the way to the consumer. So it's end to end. Then the other thing that is already happening, but it's just beginning to really have its impact now, is automation and artificial intelligence. And what we're going to do is we are going to um, allow ourselves to get much closer to a real time, real responsive, autonomous supply chain through the use of AI. And that's going to change the name of the game. And then what we're going to do is we're going to replace the jobs which can be automated with robotics and AMRs and automated storage and retrieval, and we're going to really eliminate the man being the labor, the hard-working labor. We're going to turn that over to machines, and then what we're going to be doing is talking about how to synchronize our supply chain and have autonomous supply chains that are really going to operate, even though we have tremendous uncertainty.
Yeah, these supply chain digital twins make me excited a lot. That the let's say the ability
Yes.
to see everything. Let's say also this end-to-end topic is, let's say, people use it and we all heard it, but you cannot stress it enough. I've worked in different positions where or many or maybe in reverse. I've only worked in a few positions where the supply chain was really like a big function. Many times it was divided, outbound was separate, sourcing and purchasing was separate, and so on and so on. So without using whole ability to let's say see this material flow that you mentioned at the very beginning of our discussion.
Yeah.
So we talked about this optionality as well, and how do you balance the need for efficiency with the need for flexibility nowadays? So from one side, we should let's say remain vigilant and be resilient. From the other side, the guys are chasing us to be let's say cost effective still.
Well, I guess in one word, that's a great question. I guess the only way to really balance the need for adaptability and flexibility with the need for efficiency is to say carefully. You
Ah,
have to do it carefully because uh, because I'm certainly not going to advocate doing inefficient, but if it's efficient and has no flexibility, no adaptability, it's going to fail. So I think the balance is why we're not going to replace supply chain leaders with AI, because that's where your experience comes in, and you understand, oh wow, if I do this, it's going to affect this. And that kind of ties back to your statement about supply chain has different definitions in different companies. It's crazy that a profession as well known as supply chain, one of the first questions you ask when you meet a new supply chain executive is, and so now what's your definition of supply chain?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
have
yeah.
do you have procurement? Do you have distribution? You got order entry? There's these are all parts of the supply chain, but oftentimes the supply. It's a no. I just do this part. Oh no, I just do this part. Well, that's somewhat broke.
My
So
experience would even be that amongst our community, we mostly understand the full package, but we still go immediately. Okay, so what parts do you manage? Because we
yeah,
know
exactly.
that it can
Yeah,
be, let's say, managed partially, or okay, order management will be somewhere else, or I don't know, customer service will be with sales, and so on and so on. So there are, let's say, different other topics
yes.
also to that. Okay, so maybe another topic. I've read your book, Insightful Leadership, Surfing the Waves to Organizational Excellence, which I found very interesting and also, let's say, exciting. So what inspired you to, let's say, take this approach? So more about strategic leadership. So to focus on that part, this stage, let's say.
Well, I guess I could generalize that question. I've written 31 books, and why did I write the 31 books? Because I figured out something I thought was true turned out not to be true. And so when I get working on something and I think, oh my goodness, this is different than what I thought, I then the result of that thinking usually winds up in being a book. And so what I was shocked with is something you said, I think, in the first 2 minutes of this interview, is that uncertainty is the only thing that's really certain anymore. And so the new normal is disruption. The new normal is uncertainty. And that's not what I believed 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I thought, you should get yourself together, understand what the requirements are, define the requirements, have an optimal solution, and that's what we need to have. But now I'm saying to the contrary, no, you need optionality because the future is going to be different than the past and significantly different oftentimes. And therefore, we need a different level of thinking to think about this. Um, Insightful leadership, what the book's about is really the analogy that's called, surfing. What's the? I got the book right here. It says, "Surfing the waves to organizational excellence." Surfing the wave. What does that mean? Well, what it means is if I'm sitting on my surfboard and you're on shore, I'm not looking at you. I'm looking over my shoulder and I'm looking at the waves. And I say, "Hey, Peter, see that third wave back there? You, you see it's rolling and it's going to break right here." And so when I know the first wave, nah, second wave, nah, third wave, I'm going to get on it. And so when the wave starts to approach, what I do? I got to paddle. Why? I got to get in front of the wave because if I don't get in front of the wave, I won't harness the power. If
Yeah,
I get too
and
far in
or
front,
it
the
will
wave will.
swallow me.
Yeah, wipeout. If I'm far back, it's just going to go, and I'm not going to get. So you got to get moving with the wave, and then you got to go. So the key is to have insight into what is coming. Now, that's not predicting the future. It means you're understanding the current state of what's happening, and I'm going to use that insightfulness to allow me to get ahead of the next wave, and therefore increase my profitable growth more than my competitor. And that's what we need to be doing, and that's what we need to be thinking. That's a different way of thinking.
Okay, Jim. I think let's say that's great, and also it's a great summary of this discussion. So as I was mentioning, we'll do let's say two parts of this episodes. We'll do two episodes. I couldn't imagine a better summary. Let's say of this first part. It's also, let's say, I think should be also very inspirational for all the guys and the girls who in supply chain that look at it, because my feeling and grasp of this let's say topic is exactly like that. And let's say, so this experience and the feeling, the ability to foresee, in a sense, of course, using tools, mathematics, and so on and so on. However, this gut feeling is really let's say important, and it takes time to let's say to grow it. So that's for sure. So Jim, thanks a lot for this let's say first part, and we'll be doing also the second part of the recording, and our listeners will be able to hear it also in some time. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Peter. Great questions. Good talking.
Okay, thanks, and thanks for guys listening. Take care. Dziękuję, że byliście z nami. Jeżeli macie temat, o którym chcecie, abyśmy porozmawiali, to dajcie nam znać w komentarzu. Sprawdźcie także ofertę naszych sponsorów. Dla przypomnienia, partnerami dzisiejszego odcinka byli Magna Valor, firma doradcza oferująca usługi optymalizacji łańcucha dostaw i logistyki. Tworzymy rozwiązania redukujące koszty i efektywnie skalujące operacje. Budujemy wartość waszego biznesu. Europa Systems, producent i integrator automatyki dla logistyki i produkcji. Ponad 25 lat doświadczenia zdobytego w setkach projektów w 35 krajach. Do usłyszenia w kolejnym odcinku i pamiętajcie, aby subskrybować nasz kanał.